Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we are going to start Unit 16 Welfare State, and our topic is Welfare State Contemporary Debate. The welfare state seems to compromise between the market model of classical liberalism and contemporary libertarianism. It combines the capitalist freedoms and inequalities with socialist equalities. It wants to achieve the best practical realization of the demands of liberty, equality, and justice. It retains the essentials of the capitalist system while removing its attendant abuses. However, in spite of great claims, the concept of welfare state has raised many questions. The contemporary debate in Western societies has almost been about the welfare state and the crisis in the welfare philosophy, particularly after the slowdown in the economic growth in the 1970s. The theory of welfare state believed that the mixed economy would generate a level of national income sufficient to finance the welfare services and was justified on ethical grounds. That the primary aim of the welfare philosophers was redistributive, that is, the common provision for education, health, unemployment, insurance, etc., which would bring equality and relief from deprivation, and that the welfare state would generate a form of citizenship that would soften the equitative and non altruistic attitude which was prevalent in the market society. But the questions are, does it ensure the citizens the necessary income to fight insecurities and enable them to ensure a stable, dignified, and civilized life? Does it remove the inequalities of real income by adopting measures to redistributive income between the rich and the poor, and by preventing the concentration of wealth in a few hands? Does the mixed economy uses to trend whereby private sector is curbed, crippled, and made powerless? Has the welfare state been able to free the economy from booms, depressions, inflation, and other economic crises? Does the state supply the services efficiently? The answer to all these questions is far from satisfactory. According to Barry, the assimilation of the welfare theory with the philosophy of the welfare state was an intellectual error. The theoretical mistake was the construction of a social philosophy that virtually ignored those welfare enhancing properties of the market system that had been stressed by earlier liberal political economists. As a result, there has been an inexorable expansion of the welfare state, with the result that the welfare state has muted from a system designed to protect the vulnerable from the random effects of market forces to a comprehensive set of social arrangements which had only a contingent connection with the original purpose of interventionalism. This was because the welfare theorists did not take proper account of the institutions that are required for the delivery of the welfare goods. There can be no guarantee, for example, that the outcome of a competitive party process in a democracy will coincide with the moral imperatives of state welfare. There was a serious problem as to whether majority rule procedures are efficient translation into positive policies of whatever altruistic sentiments exist in our community. Throughout the 20th century, there was a sort of consensus about the necessity for the same sort of state welfare because of the realization that there are certain genuine collective welfare ends which could not be met through voluntary actions. What is important about the contemporary attack on the welfare state is that because welfare involves coercion, it reduces freedom. The libertarian philosophers like Nozick do not approve of the idea of the welfare state. They defend the market economy and hold that the distributive policies of the state in the name of welfare violate people's rights. They do not agree with Rawls that talents and the skills of the individuals are the common assets of society, and the individuals are entitled to fruit of their talent so long as they improve the conditions of the least advantaged section of society. It is nothing short of seizing one's labor and a fundamental attack on the sovereignty of the individual. Again, too much role to the state can lead to increasing bureaucracy, increasing decline of freedom, and may result in inefficiency. It represents a violation of the rights of those who are taxed to provide funding for the poor. According to Barry, although the terms in which Nozick writes, that is, the invocation of absolute and inviolable individual rights, puts him outside the contemporary debate. His rigorous individualism and anti-statism alerted social theorists to the possibility that many welfare goals could be satisfied outside the formal apparatus of government. Since his criticism of the state is that it leads to coercion, there is a theoretical possibility that voluntary activity outside the price mechanism could solve at least some of today's welfare problems. The experience of post war welfare in the Western democracies has cast doubt on not just the ethical desirability of entrusting collective institutions with the delivery of what came to be called typical welfare services such as health, education, and insurance, but the efficiency of the method as well. The unexpected expansion of these services and the huge share of GNP absorbed by them have led to serious criticism from both the left and the right. The difficulty arises primarily from a confusion whether the role of the state is to provide a minimum standard of well-being to those who are the victims of the market economy, or a broader conception that envisages collective institutions as prima facie appropriate for the satisfaction of a potentially limitless range of human wants. In what sense can the common provision of, say, education and health enhance welfare in the sense understood by the philosophers of the welfare state? The welfare state is characterized by what public economists called churning, whereby services are funded by tax revenue, which are then returned to the citizens in the form of collective and often compulsory services such as unemployment insurance. It is not quite clear that what the rationale for this is, because the compulsory nature of many features of the welfare state means that individual choice is suppressed. Thus, the actual structure of the system does not reflect people's preferences. Critics have also expressed doubt as to how far the welfare state has been able to provide social justice. For example, the empirical inquiries into the delivery of welfare services in Britain revealed that the redistribution has helped the middle income groups, and there is reliable evidence that it is a universal feature of all democratic societies. This is known in political economy as director's law. Put it at its simplest, this law holds that since in advanced Western democracies the probability majority of voters is neither rich nor poor, whatever redistribution takes place is likely to go to it. Also, well intentioned welfare policies help one group while unintentionally harm the others. Familiar examples are the rent control law, which by freezing the supply of rented accommodation causes homelessness, or the minimum wage legislation, which rendered unemployed potential workers whose marginal productivity is lower than the decreed minimum. A more ethical argument is that excessive welfare produces a dependency culture, which is quite inconducive to good citizenship. A major example of such arguments refers to the debates which followed the creation of the Great Societies program of President Johnson. This was a massive program of welfare intervention by the state, which provided a good test case for many critics of the state welfare. It cost about 200 billion US dollars per year and included programs like Medicare, aid to families of the dependent children, and the food stamps to about 50 million people. Implicit in this argument was that capitalism was the cause of deprivation. It should be stressed that the designers of the scheme did not want to create a welfare society, but only to aid temporary and to enhance individual autonomy. There is some agreement among the observers that the system has not fulfilled its aims, although the number of people below the poverty line did reduce. This was not because more people had achieved individual autonomy, but because more had become dependent on the new welfare payments. Charles Murray makes a distinction between people in poverty, that is, people who really need help and well being, and latent poverty, that is, people who would be deprived where were it not the existence of state welfare. According to him, though the latent poverty fell to 18% when the scheme was introduced, but as the scheme progressed, the figure began to rise and it reached 22% in 1980s. Also, there was the breakdown of traditional family structures and the rise of illegitimacy due to the new benefits for unmarried mothers. This seems then to be evidence of moral hazard on a massive scale. Although there is some dispute about the figures, most commentators argue that at least that the Great Society program has failed to reduce the number on welfare. The critics of citizenship theory also maintain that the ideal of citizenship does not grant individuals a claim on the resources of the community, but that it must be accompanied by corresponding social duties. The individuals are not anonymous agents held together by general rules of just conduct and the cash nexus, but are identifiable members of particular communities, defined in terms of a complex network of social rights and duties. Work must be treated as a social obligation akin to paying taxes and obeying the law. Lawrence Mead's objection to the Great Society scheme was that its benefits were distributed as entitlements, requiring no duties on the part of the beneficiary. In other words, what is required is a stronger and perhaps bigger state to enforce the social obligation of work that is relative to the receipt of welfare. But this could lead to less liberty. There is a growing recognition that the welfare of the individual is a personal affair, which is not necessarily enhanced by over reliance on the state. A person's welfare is advanced in ways other than mere increase in income. It is as much a function of personal esteem and individual autonomy. Critics of the welfare state has such non-economic measures of value in mind when they comment on the interventionist measure of whatever type, which have a tendency to produce dependency and an anti-work ethics. It is also argued that the phenomenon of poverty and deprivation is partially a social or cultural problem. It is not caused simply by a scarcity of resources, but by the institutional arrangements which encourage the perpetuation of the maladies they are designed to alleviate. During the 20th century, the direction of causation has been from the complex structure of welfare institutions to the reproduction of welfare problems. It is being felt that the times are propitious for a fundamental re examination of the whole issue. The return of education, health, pension, and so on to individuals through various methods of empowerment, such as the voucher scheme, could mark the beginnings of a new consensus. Also, it is felt that decentralization of welfare services to smaller political units would be a more feasible way of advancing the moral claims and the attendant social obligations associated with citizenship. Here we want to wind up today's lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.